You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis, host of the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and we have a first-time guest on the show today, Zach Berry from the Ole Miss Spirit. On 3 is in the house, and we're going to talk portal. We're going to talk the Ole Miss roster, and of course, I'm going to ask him the top Ole Miss football quarterbacks of all time. Anyway, Zach, how you doing, bud?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. It's an honor. First time guest.
This is a really big deal. I like to have, and one thing that I've been doing is I have a philosophy of not competing. I don't compete with anybody, so everybody is fair game to do it, and I just want to have everybody that's anybody associated with Ole Miss football on the show. And eventually, I'm going to get Lane in the whole 9 yards, and all of that's going to happen.
Yeah. It's a great philosophy. It's a great strategy to have, just all different kinds of viewpoints and opinions and hot takes. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, don't tell anybody, but that's kind of my secret sauce. So we'll start off with, I listened to a little bit of your podcast. I think it was yesterday or the day before with Ben Garrett. And y'all were specifically talking about the roster at Ole Miss, and Ben is, for better or for worse, one of the most hyperbolic people that I have met. So everything's either terrible at the bottom of the bottom or it's at the very tip top. There's really no middle ground with Ben. But Ben's claimed that Ole Miss has the best football roster in the country. And I do think Ole Miss has a very good roster. And I've described it on my show in the transfer portal. Lane Kiffin was looking to fill roles, not holes. And what is your take on this roster as a whole?
Yeah, I think my colleague's certainly onto something. Look, Ben is a passionate man. He's passionate about Ole Miss athletics. And look, who can blame him for 2024? I mean, this is the most hyped, the most anticipated football season ever in the history of the program. I don't feel like that's too hyperbolic to say. Probably a legitimate top 5 preseason team, at least top 10. Joel Klatt thinks they're top 5 right now.
Which is kind of important, by the way, Zach. Sorry about that. But Joel Klatt is a Fox employee, which he is not obligated to the SEC, like the way that like Paul Feinbaum would be. So whenever Joel Klatt says that, you know that it's a real take.
Right. Yeah. And look, I do think this roster, top to bottom right now, is easily on paper the best Ole Miss team that's ever been assembled. And I think that it is a legitimate top 5 to top 10 team. I think until the ball is put down in September and games kick off, it's hard to leave Ole Miss out of the conversation for college football playoff contention. I mean, right now, I think the odds on, I think it was BetMGM had Ole Miss at plus 1,600. That's not terrible if you're looking to place a futures bet. Jackson Dart's up there in the top 10 among Heisman odds right now. This defense, which I think doesn't get enough credit for how good they were a year ago, has added a ton of pieces. And not just, like you said, not just filling holes, but filling roles, but also experienced Power 4 guys that played a lot at where they were before, are highly touted, and are, a lot of names on that 2025 NFL mock draft board right now, Stephen.
Yeah, and Lane Kiffin is not through adding. Now, Ole Miss is through the attrition part where they don't necessarily have to worry about players leaving because the next transfer portal window opens up after the season. But they are still adding. And 4 players that I talked about on today's show, I talked about Tyler Barron because those rumors and that gossip will not go away. And apparently Ole Miss is in the 3 on that one. And then a couple of wide receivers that both might be 2025 type players that are being added into the room. And then there's another thing I want to talk about that's interesting because they're doing a really good job of being quiet about this, and that is Cormani McClain. And you're not hearing any smoke on that. He's got 10 schools, both all Big 12, Big 10, and SEC. But if you look on his social, Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss Recruiting, all of the usual suspects follow this player, which means that Ole Miss is probably one of the SEC schools.
Could be. His my colleague Pete Nakos does a hell of a job covering the portal for us at On Three, and I've talked with him a little bit just to kind of gauge the interest there. And he said, look, he's not saying much. His mom's not saying much. They're being very vague with everything. So I do not have it confirmed whether or not Ole Miss has in fact reached out or tried to set up a visit. It could certainly be possible. And yeah, talking about future bets, I mean, that could be a futures type pickup for, hey, we already got Trey Amos, we got Isaiah Hamilton. We don't need you to be the guy right now, but we could pair you up with somebody in 2025. Because look, he had an up and down season at Colorado. There was a lot of speculation with, where his head was at, where his mind, his mindset, how motivated was he? Deion was very outspoken, whether that's good or bad with McClain. There's no question he's talented. There's no question that he has the skills to do it. It's just a matter of, can he find that right fit? So yeah, I don't know if McClain is there. If you made me say today, I would say no, because I think the pickup of Isaiah Hamilton kind of solidifies that secondary right now with him and Amos opposite him. I think you've got two shutdown NFL caliber corners. And then staying on that futures trend, I think Jacob Bostick is an interesting offer for Ole Miss, the Iowa wide receiver. Recorded no stats at Iowa, which, look.
Well, that could be completely normal. He could be all Big Ten and get no stats.
I talked to Jacob, and we had a good laugh about the offense being incredibly different from what Ole Miss could potentially be for him. But a really good athlete, ran track his entire life. He was a state champion in the triple jump. So he can pick him up and put him down. He's got good size. I think that could certainly be a pickup where, I had a lot of people that were, why are they offering receivers? And then immediately it's, what's Deion Smith doing? It's like, okay, everybody calm down. Deion's fine. This is just Lane being Lane. He wants to add talent whenever he can. There is no limit to having too much talent or too much competition in a room or on the practice field.
And a real situation is, and what Ole Miss fans need to realize, Ole Miss has a real problem coming in 2025. And if you do not get ahead of this as much as you can, it could mount up to where there's only one or two windows to where you have to fill in 4 different wide receivers, 2 different running backs, defensive line. I mean, there's a lot of prospects that are basically essentially one and done. When they call it a last dance, they're not being hyperbolic there.
Right. And that's kind of been the mantra, right? Telling everybody, and look, national media have noticed too, where it's, hey, Lane's going all in this year. And I think it's a perfect plan with the schedule set up, when the games are played, where they're played. I mean, I've said it numerous times. I think Ole Miss's 2 toughest games are at home. You've got Georgia and Oklahoma. Look, I know LSU's on the road and it's Baton Rouge and all of that, and all due respect to Death Valley, Jaden Daniels ain't walking through that door. So I think if Ole Miss is healthy, Ole Miss will be a favorite and should win that ball game. I don't think that's crazy to say at this point, Steven. I mean, that's how different Ole Miss football is these days. Normally you'd say, well, it's at LSU, probably bet on the Tigers. Maybe Ole Miss can sneak one out. No, like now it's the mindset of Ole Miss is going down there expecting to win a football game. So, going all in on, Walter Nolan, Prince Umamielen, Nate Calippo, Julius Buello, Juice Wells. I mean, we talked about that on our show, where that's what's so intriguing about this football team is everyone has bought in on, hey, last dance. This is our shot at a title, but it's all these dudes that it's their draft year. So it's time to, chase that bag a little bit and put it all out there. So, barring injury, I mean, this roster, I mean, I think Ben is onto something with, it's something that most coaches would envy right now.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, Zach Berry is going to give us his top 5 Ole Miss quarterbacks all-time list. And if it's anything like yesterday, it'll be pretty good. Guys, I need all of you to listen up for this huge announcement. I've been tracking the leaderboards every day, keeping my eyes on the scores, putting my heart into it, and I'm super pumped to announce I'm finally on top. That's right. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on the classic Monopoly that you can play anywhere, anytime. Explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Vegas to Camelot to the freaking moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. You can charge rent on iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. You can charge your friends rent as well, or go to their Monopoly money and pull bank heist, or take a wrecking ball to their landmarks and take their money. But my favorite part is the leaderboards, where you can see who the Monopoly tycoon is and who is going bankrupt. So get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home the big win of your own. Right now, you can bet on the Ole Miss win total for 2024 that currently sits at an over-under of 9.5. You can get that odds at minus 144, by the way. Or you can bet on Ole Miss to win the SEC, which currently sits at plus 650. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets to bet on spreads, money lines, prayer props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down all the volume with all that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinion, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, it is Zach Berry's turn to hit the hot seat. We are going to get his top quarterbacks in Ole Miss football history. Zach, we start with number 5. We go up to number 1, and you're a little bit older than Dalen. We had an Ole Miss student on the show yesterday, and you could tell the age range that he was in.
Okay.
You're a little bit older than that. Again, though, I do not expect to hear Russ Showers on this broadcast today. So we will see exactly how this goes. So let's start it out. Top quarterbacks in Ole Miss football history, number 5.
Yeah, as much as I love John Forcade, not going to be on here. All due respect to him, though. He kind of paved the way for some of the style of some of these quarterbacks that are going to be on this list. Starting at number 5. Oh boy, man, this is tough. Okay, I'll go Bo Wallace. Kind of started the trend of being cool to go play quarterback at Ole Miss again. Beat Alabama. Second most career yards in Ole Miss history, and did a lot of it banged up too. I don't think people remember that as much as they should. When he was healthy, he was dialed in, and he was a true dual threat. But yeah, I'll put Bo Wallace at number 5.
Yeah, and his Twitter beef with Hottie Toddy Strohs right now is really going off the chain. So it's not quite Kendrick versus Drake, but it's our own Ole Miss version. Okay. So number 4.
Number 4. This one could have an asterisk next to it because we got to wait and see. I'll put Jackson Dart in there. I think winning 11 games for the first time ever is huge. Nobody's ever done that. And I think that he has a real shot at truly etching his name, maybe not, in the record books. He may not break all the records, but I do think that he has a legitimate chance to put Ole Miss in a college football playoff for the first time ever in program history. And hey, if things go well, the always elusive number 1 ranking could happen. I think you got to circle the date of Ole Miss versus Georgia in Oxford. Potential of 2 undefeated teams, probably going to be a 1 versus 2. Lane might figure out a way to get Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce there for game day. I mean, just a huge potential day in program history. I think Jackson Dart deserves his spot in the top 5. 2 years, he's already 5th in career yards, and he had the 5th best passing season. I think last year you saw the maturation, the decision-making was so much better. He's more comfortable in the offense. And look, all due respect to Bo Wallace, and he can't really help it. The weapons Bo Wallace had a lot better than what Jackson Dart, some of the other guys on this list had.
Jackson Dart on the Georgia game, that is his own Archie Manning mule game. That is the Jackson Massacre, Ole Miss and Tennessee. That is his legacy game. But to get there, he has to perform over the course of the season. Number 3.
Yeah, number 3, I am going to go Chad Kelly. I mean, just electric as anyone. The 2 years, even though one was cut short with the knee injury, I mean, the dude was absurd. He had one of the better single seasons in SEC history for a guy not named Cam Newton or Johnny Manziel. Look, Kirby Smart's introduction into the SEC as a head coach, he got baptized by Chad Kelly. And yeah, beat Alabama on the road. Just a guy that really exemplified, again, shout out to John Forcade, just a dual threat guy that was not scared, not afraid to challenge people. Legs were good. I mean, probably one of the most talented arms ever in the history of the program, maybe in the history of the SEC. I mean, just the throw that he made in that Georgia game with a guy in his face to, I believe it was DeMarcus Lodge, just in stride, got hit under the chin, and just delivered a perfect ball. When he had his head screwed on straight and was making good decisions, Ole Miss was damn near unbeatable.
Number 2.
Yeah, I'm going to go Matt Corral. I think the transition from playing for Matt Luke, fighting with John Rice Plumlee in the Rich Rod system and trying to, find his footing, and then Lane Kiffin's hired and he stays true to the program, sticks around, and it really paid off for him. No matter what happens with his NFL career and what he's doing now in the UFL or, whatever it is, just a guy that really, I guess, brought Ole Miss football back to relevancy. And, without the ankle injury in that Sugar Bowl, we'll never know what happens. But, I mean, I was there in person. Still to this day, I say it's the best live sporting event I've ever been to. Single-handedly beat Tennessee in Neyland Stadium. I mean, 30-plus carries, made some big throws. But, I mean, I would say, without a doubt, the best arm talent ever in the history of Ole Miss football. The dude could stand flat-footed and throw it 75 yards. Just a special talent, and all the cliches, but it's true. I mean, was just gritty, tough. I say all the time, if he was as big as Bo Wallace or as big as Eli Manning, there's no telling what he would have done with the skill set and the mindset that he had. But yeah, I think Matt Corral, I mean, he's 3rd all time in career yards. He had almost a 3,400 passing yard season in 2021 in that second year with Kiffin. And yeah, oh, by the way, he threw for 513 yards against South Carolina in 2020, which is the most ever in a game in Ole Miss history.
That's the clipboard game.
Yeah, I mean, just a special talent, and a guy that would probably be number 1 if it wasn't for somebody else.
Yes, and we'll go there now. This is probably a free space, but number 1.
I've gone back and forth on this, and not to just be pedantic about it or try to create conversation, but I do think Corral has a case for being number 1. But it's Eli Manning. I mean, 10,000 plus career yards, over 3,000 yards passing twice in 02 and 03. I mean, had Ole Miss on the doorstep of getting to Atlanta for the first time ever. And again, not his fault and nothing that he could control. But, look, Chris Collins and Bill Flowers and those guys, they were good. They were talented. But, I mean, he was working with, duct tape and some chewing gum and the team that he was playing with and how he elevated them. I mean, just truly shows just how special he was. I mean, 84 career passing touchdowns. The closest is Bo Wallace with 62. He had 31 in one season, 6 in one game against Arkansas in the 7 overtime one. But
that one gives me nightmares. Don't talk about that.
Yeah, just incredible. I mean, he deserves a statue somewhere. I mean, he's got 2 Super Bowls. That people were roasting Tom Brady because of Eli Manning on Netflix. I mean, just a truly generational guy that kind of put Ole Miss on the map after some tough years in the late 80s and 90s, and then those early 2000s were a lot of fun for Ole Miss because of Eli Manning. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's a free space, but I think sometimes kind of Occam's razor where the easiest answer is the most obvious.
And in my opinion, some honorable mentions here is probably, you mentioned 4K earlier. 4K is awesome. He'll be providing some analysis during this football season for the Locked On Ole Miss podcast channel.
Yeah.
But also Romero Miller. Miller needs to be at least an honorable mention on this list because all of this doesn't happen without him. Yeah.
He's number 6 for me. I know Romero, and I've asked him plenty of times about, hey man, the 4 years you were there, some of the moments were special. Catching the touchdown from Deuce, just the throw to Corey Peterson at Auburn. My old colleague and boss, Neil McCready over at Rivals, I think he nails it when he says that Romero Miller was kind of the catalyst to really bringing Ole Miss back in those late 90s and early 2000s, makes it possible for Eli Manning to take a chance at Ole Miss, because Romero was a parade All-American. I don't think people know that. Recruiting services weren't around back then. It was all magazines and newspapers, but Romero could have gone anywhere, and he chose to go to Ole Miss, and that's huge.
I will disagree on this state. It was not Romero. It was Rufus French, who was from that area, that started all of that in 1996. Yes. Rufus French was the one that ended up leading into that 1997 class with Romero and Deuce and Terrence Metcalf and all of that. Yeah. But I think Rufus French is the player that kind of turned Ole Miss football around.
Yeah, he was another blue chip guy, had SEC offers. I think there were some West Coast teams, back then, UCLA's were looking at him. But yeah, I mean, those late 90s teams were so much fun. And I mean, that Motor City Bowl win over Randy Moss and company, talking to guys like Brock Kreitz and that team that beat Randy Moss and just, Romero was a huge part of Ole Miss and just the quarterback culture at Ole Miss being what it is today.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of those, like Walker. I've talked to a couple of times. I've talked to Todd Wade, all people in that era. I mean, that was honestly the last era of innocence in college athletics, because once the century turned over, everything started to change, and now we have what we have. Anyway, thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Zach Berry from the Ole Miss Spirit, what have you got going on this week over at the Ole Miss Spirit, Zach?
Yeah, so, I mean, look, each and every day, portal. Basketball is kind of, I wouldn't say it's in neutral, but they've geared down a little bit. They're honestly, I think it's a little bit of a waiting game right now with Matthew Morell. He got the call for the NBA Combine tryout. He's doing that. It's a 2-day event where guys fight for spots to get invited to the Combine. I talked to some people over the weekend. There's some cautious optimism there that people think that Morell will return to Ole Miss. If that's the case, I think Ole Miss will probably be done, definitely in the backcourt. I do think that there's a front court addition that's probably going to happen at some point. Just a guy to come off the bench, grab rebounds, defend.
Is that the Ukrainian guy potentially?
Yeah, and look,
I can't say his name. I'm not even going to try that. It took me 2 weeks to get Uman Mielen.
Yeah, out of respect to him, I'm not going to try. But yes, he originally started his career at Tulsa and then went to Monmouth. Nikita Konstantinovsky, we'll give it that.
That at least sounded confident, so I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, 6'10", probably about 240, 245. I think would be a good body off the bench to take some minutes away from some of the other guys. Grab rebounds, defend. I think that's something that people need to keep an eye on. He's on campus today. Ole Miss has been in contact with him, so that could be something to watch. But yeah, I think outside of him, it's Matthew Morell. Will he or won't he come back? I think he will. First of all, just from a financial standpoint, I think he makes more money with the Grove Collective than he would make overseas. And but hey, he's certainly talented enough to get the call up for the combine, so maybe he doesn't. But yeah, that's it. And then football wise, we talked about it. Tyler Barron, Ole Miss is in it. It's Miami, Southern Cal. Just got back from LA. We'll see if there's a decision that is potentially imminent. I don't know. He's been pretty quiet since getting back from LA. And then, Jacob Bostick from Iowa, the wide receiver. Elijah Badger from Arizona State. Will they get him in for a visit to potentially add another talented dude to that wide receiver room? So we've got that going on. And then my guy, Jake Thompson, he's covering baseball as Ole Miss is just in and off and on the bubble constantly. They had a chance to sweep Auburn, didn't get it done. But there's a sliver of hope to make the postseason. It's going to be tough sledding this weekend against Texas A&M, but yeah, we got a lot going on at omspirit.com. It's only $1 to join if you want to get in the conversation and join the message board. We talk about anything and everything Ole Miss. Shout out to Rebel Rags, but yeah, we have fun and we cover the hell out of Ole Miss sports. So if you're a fan, you'll love it.
Check out the podcast network as well if you're listening to this as well. It definitely is good stuff. It's a nice intro to all the personalities around the Ole Miss Spirit. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the Talk of Champions Network, anywhere you get your podcast, we've got stuff every day. Had some good conversation with Ben yesterday. I spoke with Talia Goodman. She covers women's basketball, the portal. She just joined On3. She's a hell of a talent. She works her tail off and covers the hell out of women's hoops in the portal. Talked to her today about Coach Yo and what that program has become. And I got some more good stuff coming the rest of the way this week. All right, Zach, thank you very much for coming on. We'll talk to you later, bud.
All right, buddy. Appreciate it.